Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening. Roxanne found something off about Madeline's claim of making a trip back to Zandinia to visit her ancestors' graves. Madame Zander isn't from Zandinia in the first place, merely having gone there to work when she was young. What ancestors could the Zander family have there? With that said, Madeline couldn't possibly be visiting her biological father's ancestors' graves. After all, that piece of trash father of hers doesn't regard her as a daughter even now. Following that line of thought, she was convinced that her best friend was lying to her and had some other reason for going to Zandinia. That aside, it must have something to do with that scumbag father of hers. When Lucien returned home, he swiftly informed his wife about the situation. He told her that Caden reported about Jonathan bringing along a great number of bodyguards when he accompanied Madeline to Zandinia. At once, the couple started worrying. Is he planning to have a fight with someone that he brought so many bodyguards along? Thus, Roxanne quickly phoned her best friend. As soon as the call went through, she asked urgently, "Are you okay, Madeline? Did something serious happen? Don't hide it and keep me in the dark. Tell me quick." Realizing that she would not be able to keep the truth from Roxanne, Madeline told her everything. As Roxanne listened, fury lined her features, and she gritted her teeth hard. "Stay calm, Roxanne. You must keep yourself in a good mood now that you're pregnant. We're all fine and are on our way back. However, we're not planning to take a flight this time. Jonathan said he'd bring us around for some fun while making the return trip." Madeline sounded relaxed, putting Roxanne at ease. All that notwithstanding, she had a new understanding of her best friend's piece of trash of a father, Norton, and his contemptible family. Good Lord. Forcibly taking Madame Zander away is already a crime. On top of that, they even had delusions of using Madeline as a pawn for a political marriage. How ridiculous. After hanging up the phone, Roxanne related the situation to Lucien. When Lucien had listened to it all, he wore a relaxed expression, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Jonathan has really seen the light. With this trip, not only has he secured his girlfriend, but he'd undoubtedly won his future mother-in-law over. Let's just wait to attend their wedding. Mulling it over, Roxanne felt that it indeed made sense. I'm still mad, Lucien. Norton Sheffield is a downright scumbag. Rage still blazed within her. I know of him. He's exceedingly barbaric in his tactics of doing business in Zandinia. I reckon there's likely a problem with Southern Star Group that he's so desperate to force Madeline into a political marriage. In that case, I don't mind giving things a push. With that said, Lucien snagged his phone and gave Caden a call. Investigate the condition of Southern Star Group in Zandinia and teach their chairman, Mr. Sheffield, a hard lesson. Understood. Caden answered, all too familiar with the tactics in doing so. In no time, he dug out a ton of problems with the company. There was a whole boatload of them. It turned out that Southern Star Group invested in mineral resources abroad in recent years, but all the projects failed. The company's debt ratio had also swelled to epic proportions. With just a prick, it would burst like a balloon. In fact, it had even violated the law in many ways previously, such as its real estate companies acquiring land by illegal means and its mineral processing plants causing severe damage to the environment. In the face of all that, Lucien ordered, leak everything out. Needless to say, an empty company worth nothing much in market value could not withstand such scandals. Hence, Southern Star Group's shares would certainly plummet for several days in a row until the company became insolvent. Consequently, the various banks and creditors would definitely come knocking at the door to collect the debts in a mad frenzy. At that time, Norton would be powerless to salvage things. Meanwhile, at the Sheffield residence, Wilmer's Porsche pulled up at the entrance. As Wilmer stepped out of the car, he adjusted his clothes before walking into the living room in a composed manner. He had seen a photo of Madeline. Ever since that first sight, he had been unable to get her off his mind. Her exquisite features seemed to be out of this world. Thus, even though Wilmer knew that Norton had arranged this marriage of convenience to save Southern Star Group from imminent danger, he was willing to go through with his proposal. In fact, he had even convinced his father Jensen to allow him to get married. After all, in Wilmer's mind, it was natural to give up a little bit of money to court and win over a belle. However, what awaited Wilmer was Norton's dejected expression and Mildred's dark gaze. "Mr. Sheffield, hasn't Madeline returned?" Wilmer frowned, evidently displeased with the situation. Norton raised his head to look at Wilmer, not knowing what to say. Just as he was about to explain the situation by blaming Madeline's disobedience, Mildred shot up from her seat in fury at that exact moment. Gritting her teeth, she seethed, "Mr. Wilmer, you're way too good for Madeline. Never would we have imagined that she has gotten a boyfriend behind our back and has now even gotten herself pregnant. We're enraged beyond words. Just before you arrived, her dad had gotten into a huge argument with her." Mildred sighed in exasperation. "Oh, I can't believe this." Wilmer blinked, dumbfounded. For a second, words eluded him. The next moment, a look of disgust filled his eyes. He had been expecting a morally upright woman. "Fine. Since that's the case, this whole ordeal cannot be carried forward. Goodbye, Mr. Sheffield." Wilmer was burning with rage as he turned around and walked away impatiently. Norton's lips quivered, but no words came out. If he were to be truthful, he had to admit that vilifying Madeline's morality would immediately make the Cheever family back down from the deal. Mildred's approach was better than his plan to provide the Cheevers with endless explanations. If that were to happen, he might very well offend the Cheever family instead. In the end, he turned to look at Mildred with a crestfallen expression. "Darling, can your side of the family still lend us some money? We just need about 100 million to be able to redeem the mineral resources abroad. By then, we can continue to develop the area and get through this difficult time." Instantly, Mildred shrieked like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. "Hey Norton, where would my family still have the money? We've given what we can to you a long time ago, and didn't that result in a severe loss as well? If you ask me, since your daughter has gotten entangled with the Queen family of Horrington, you should consider asking the Queen family for help. See if they can at least help patch up some holes in this sinking ship." Norton was rendered speechless. He threw Mildred a look of exasperation as though one would look at an idiot. All the while, Mildred and her two daughters had been bullying Lorraine and Madeline. Not to mention that they had practically kidnapped Madeline back to Zandinia that time around. How could they hope that his future son-in-law Jonathan would help them? They should be grateful that Jonathan had not turned hostile and sought revenge. Just as Norton was lost in thought, his phone suddenly rang. It was a call from the secretary of the board of directors. "Mr. Sheffield, there's terrible news. Our company's shares are plummeting as we speak." What on earth had happened? Do you know anything about it? "The board of directors is hoping that you can show up immediately for a meeting." Norton froze on the spot. Alas, one attracts what one fears. Mildred was still going on, nagging relentlessly beside him. All of a sudden, Norton exploded. Shut the hell up." Taken by surprise, Mildred stared at him in shock before roaring, "Why the hell are you shouting? What's the use of you shouting at me?" Norton no longer wanted to talk to her. Getting up from his seat, he got ready to go to the office. However, before he could leave the house, a series of cars drove into the compound. Upon closer inspection, Norton realized that those were all people he knew. Among them was a manager of a bank which Southern Star Group had taken a 500 million loan from. He had been postponing the payment again and again. Another was a person in charge of a private funds group. With a look of fury written on his face, he dashed to the living room the moment he stepped out of the car. Following suit were many contractors. All of them looked unfriendly as they marched toward Norton. "Mr. Sheffield, we can't tolerate it any longer. You're a big shot. Shouldn't you be able to settle a small debt of a few million? Mr. Sheffield, The upper management is beginning to take action. If the numbers don't tally, I will lose my job. Please be merciful and pay up the 500 million that you owe. Norton Sheffield, Southern Star Group is done for. What are we going to do now? I demand you to give me an answer. That day, the gate of Norton's mansion was broken into by countless people. Shocked out of her wits, Mildred hurried upstairs and locked the door. Jonathan and Madeline were completely clueless about Lucian's harsh punishments against Norton. The sun was already setting. A Rolls-Royce was on the road, heading to Horrington from Zandinia. More specifically, Jonathan had slowed down the car after they had passed the outskirts of the city to enjoy the beautiful and unique scenery. Where do you get this car, Jonathan? Doesn't this car belong to the person in charge of the hotel? Lorraine was overjoyed to see how much in love Madeline and Jonathan were. Jonathan shook his head in response. Madame Zander, this car doesn't belong to the person in charge. The car is specially provided by the company for the hotel to welcome distinguished guests. Thus, I've requested to borrow it for a few days. Once we arrive at Horrington, I'll ask someone to return the car. I see. Well, that's splendid. This car can make Mildred know her place in an instant. I assume the car is extremely expensive. Lorraine had never sat in a Rolls-Royce before, even though Norton had one in the past. Despite that, Lorraine had always refused to sit in it. After all, she knew the car was Mildred's dowry. Mom, this car is, in fact, expensive. The price can go up to a few million. However, it wouldn't be difficult for Jonathan to buy one if he wanted to, but there's no need for that at the moment. Madeline seid inwardly. It looks like Mom knows nothing about the assets of the Queen family. Jonathan merely smiled as he explained, Madame Zander, you can find cars like this in my house too. In fact, some of them cost more than the one I'm driving now. I've driven them when I was younger, but I don't drive as much anymore. If you like this car, I can assign a driver to drive the one at home and make it your personal transport. Jonathan's words made Lorraine beam in excitement. She was feeling utterly spoiled. Meanwhile, Madeline looked at Jonathan from the corner of her eyes, impressed by his tactics to win his future mother-in-law over. Warmth filled her heart as she smiled. The car came to a stop at a rest area. Stepping out of the car, Jonathan went in search of some food and warm water for the mother-daughter pair to have on the road. Seeing that, both Lorraine and Madeline were touched by his thoughtfulness. When Jonathan returned to the car, Lorraine began discussing the matters of marriage. She wanted to know if the Queen family had any other requests from her end. Mom, don't you think you're thinking too far ahead? Jonathan and I have just started dating a few days ago. We just want to go dating and have fun now. Madeline rolled her eyes at Lorraine as a blush crept up her face. To her surprise, Lorraine gave her a warning look. Do you know how old you are now? You can go on your sweet dates after you got married. Moreover, Jonathan's family is a famous prestigious family in Horrington. You should be worried about whether or not you are a good fit. My gosh. What kind of mother would berate her own daughter like that? Madeline pouted before turning to Jonathan. Acting coy, she blinked innocently before asking, Jonathan, tell me, do you think I'm a good fit? Jonathan chuckled before nodding fervently. Of course. You're a terrific fit. He then smiled at Lorraine. Madame Zander, don't worry. There isn't any rule in my house. Everyone's just waiting for me to get married soon. Okay. Then when we return, can you arrange a meetup between me and your parents? Would that be all right? Lorraine seemed to be anxious. It was as though she was worried that her daughter would never get married. Sure. When we got back, I'll ask my folks to have a chat with you. My parents are really easy to get along with. Jonathan did not hesitate to give a firm answer. Upon hearing that, Madeline did not make another noise. Her heart was racing in her chest. It didn't seem too bad of an idea for Lorraine to speed up the process and send them straight to the altar. From the corner of her eyes, Madeline peeped at Jonathan's handsome side profile. A surge of sweetness filled her heart. Jonathan seemed to feel it too. Turning his head slightly, he met her eyes with a look of warm affection. Oh, that's right. Madam Xander, we have to make a stop at the town in front. I heard that the scenery there is breathtaking. We'll reserve 2 hotel rooms to stay in. What do you think? Jonathan asked in a gentle tone. Lorraine nodded instantly. No problem. 2 rooms would be just nice. You and Maddie can take one while I take the other. When he heard that, Jonathan was taken aback. He had intended for Madeline to share a room with Lorraine. He did not expect Lorraine to make such an arrangement. Madeline's face turned a bright shade of red. She immediately protested. Mom, what are you talking about? I'll be sleeping in your room. Jonathan and Madeline had already gone on their honeymoon. Roxanne began planning in her head for her honeymoon trip with Lucian. It was almost winter holiday, so the children were free as well. Furthermore, she had yet to reach the stage where her pregnancy was obvious, so she could still freely move around. Hence, Roxanne began picking the destinations for the trip. Lucian agreed to it. He felt that it was time for him to reward himself after working hard for Farwell Group for so many years. Of course, he said those words on purpose before Elias. After all, Elias left the mess to his son so that he could enjoy his own life before he even reached 40. It seemed like he was confident that Lucian would be able to handle the company well. Sonia then chimed in, suggesting family-friendly places. Right then, Elias burst everyone's bubble. Roxanne, I don't think it's a good idea to go anywhere now. After all, Grant's condition has not stabilized yet. Roxanne froze. The mention of that man brought a bitter smile onto her face. For dozens of years, Grant had never given her even 1 second of attention. It was as if she was dead to him. Naturally, it would not be her habit to think about him. I'll continue performing acupuncture for him today before taking him to the hospital for a checkup. I'd like to find out how the tumor is, Roxanne muttered. Sonia and Elias nodded. Lucian started consoling his wife. Regardless of everything, we'll send him off. Consider this as us being kind. We always go on holiday some other time in the future. All right. We'll go on a family trip by then. I'm sure we'll have an easier time taking care of the children with Mom and Dad with us, Roxanne said as she turned to Sonia with a smile. Sonia was not expecting to hear that from her, and a smile manifested on her lips in pleasant surprise. Then, she bobbed her head and answered, sure. I'll help with the children with Elias. That afternoon, Roxanne and Lucian went back to the Jarvis main residence. They asked the housekeeper about Grant's recent condition, and it seemed like he was mostly fine. He had a routine for his meals and sleep. Although there were times when his gastritis would flare up, his medicine could keep it under control. When Roxanne entered the room, something on the wall caught her attention and made her snap her head upward. It was a large wedding photo of Grant and her mother. Evidently, the photo was a new print, for the colors were vibrant. Roxanne's mother was smiling sweetly in the photo. Maybe she thought she was the most blessed woman in the world at that time, Roxanne mused. Who would have known that the man who promised to spend the rest of his life with her would betray her? She cried so much that her tears went dry. Then, she was so sad that she broke down. Roxanne stared at the photo for a long time before resentment swelled in her chest. She turned to look at Grant. Grant seemed dazed as he stared right at the photo. Then, a look of pain crossed his face, and tears welled up in his eyes. Roxanne, I'm sorry. I've made a mistake. A grave mistake. I was too ambitious that I lost everything in the end. I've wronged your mother, and I owe her so much. I wish I could die faster so that I could apologize to her in the afterlife. Grant cried out before dissolving into tears as he broke down. His words and his cries made Roxanne feel so uncomfortable that she retreated from the room. She wanted to recompose herself too, or else she would not be able to treat Grant either. The housekeepers walked over cautiously and whispered to Roxanne, "Mrs. Farwell, your father has been crying these few days. He kept apologizing to the photo." Roxanne curled her lips into a mocking smile. "Is that so? Well, you just need to do your job and ignore him. What's the use of regret and apologies when you're on the verge of death? My mother won't come back to life. Regardless of whether you're sincere or not, do you think you have another chance at this? You don't. The destruction you've brought to this family will always be here until the end of time." After recollecting herself, Roxanne began performing acupuncture on Grant. Soon, Grant slowly calmed down, but he did not dare to lift his head to look at his daughter. However, his complexion looked better than before. The waxy pallor had gone away, but he was still yellower than the average person. "It will go to the hospital for a checkup today," Roxanne told him in a soft voice. Nevertheless, she did not wait for Grant's response before leaving the room and asking the housekeeper to make preparations for the trip. Lucian walked over to his wife's side and held her hand. With a nod and a smile, he said, "You've done everything you could. The luckiest thing in his life is that he has you as a daughter." A wry smile crept onto Roxanne's face. "Maybe. But the unluckiest thing in my life is that I have a father like him." After the preparations, Lucian and Roxanne drove Grant to the hospital. The tests took a long time, but Roxanne did not need to worry about it. Madeline's leave was long, so Roxanne had asked Linda to temporarily help manage some of Madeline's work. Linda had arranged one test after another without wasting much time. 2 hours later, the results were out. Linda even held a meeting with the various doctors to come up with a summary report. She then informed Roxanne, "Dr. Jarvis, the doctors of various departments have come to the conclusion that the tumor in Mr. Jarvis' stomach has stabilized and is even showing signs of shrinking. The cancer cells that have spread to other places are showing signs of stabilizing as well. Hence, the doctors hypothesized that he has another 3 more months to live." A sorrowful look flitted across Linda's face once she was done telling Roxanne about that, and she added, "I am sorry, Dr. Jarvis. He has 3 extra months to live." "Roxanne, your treatment is working," Lucian said, patting Roxanne's shoulder. "Not bad. He's lucky to have so many days left to live," Roxanne muttered in a flat tone. No one could tell whether she was happy or sad. Linda thought that Roxanne and Lucian would be devastated, but it seemed like they were not, so it would be better for her to keep quiet. The doctors did not prescribe Grant any medicine after his tests. They all knew that Grant only had that much time to live because Roxanne was fighting against the Grim Reaper for him with her treatment. After exiting the hospital, Lucian told Grant the results of his tests. He seemed to have fallen deep in his thoughts when he heard that he had more days to live, but Lucian could not figure out what he was thinking about. A long while later, Grant finally said, "Lucian, Roxanne, can you take me to the cemetery? I'd like to visit her." Roxanne, who was in the front passenger seat, turned to glance at Grant. Okay, we'll bring you there," Lucian swiftly replied. Grant's action would bring some meaning to Roxanne's treatment. When they reached the cemetery, the sky abruptly darkened, and raindrops began falling. Roxanne and Lucian both stood at the entrance of the cemetery as they watched Grant slowly move his way up the stairs until he reached Roxanne's mother's grave. Upon seeing his first wife's photo on the gravestone, Grant froze and stared at her face for a long while. Finally, he pulled the hem of his shirt and began wiping the gravestone, his tears rolling down his cheeks. He mumbled under his breath, "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Please take me with you. I really want to leave with you now. Please forgive me." Lucian held Roxanne's hand and guided her back into the car. After over an hour, Grant finally trudged out of the cemetery. By then, he was soaked from head to toe. His eyes were dull as if he had left his soul behind at the grave. He did not speak even after getting into the car. At a mansion in the suburbs of Horrington, Winnie received a call from Grant. She was shocked to learn that he had cancer and was facing imminent death. Upon hearing the news, Winnie paused for a moment before responding coldly, "You reap what you sow, Grant. You deserve it." After a brief silence, Grant calmly asked, Winnie, I only called to ask for one thing. Do you remember the heirloom that belonged to Roxanne's mother? Please return it to me so that I can give it to Roxanne." Winnie's eyes blazed with anger as she bellowed, "What nonsense are you talking about? I have never taken it." Her son, Yosef, who had heavy dark circles under his eyes, kept yawning and asking, Mom, who's on the phone?" Your dad," she snapped. Grant's voice lowered a few notches. "Winnie, I'm dying. I hope you still have a little bit of conscience. Return the heirloom, and we're even." "Listen up, Grant. I didn't take it. I did want to take it back then. We searched the whole house, but we couldn't find it. It's up to you to believe it or not. Don't call me again in the future." Winnie hung up the phone before Grant could respond. Yosef was unfazed by her furious expression and instead prodded, "Mom, hurry up and cook." Feeling annoyed by her son's listless state, Winnie could not help but chide, Yosef, you need to get a job. You come home late and leave early every day. Besides, your gambling addiction is out of control. Don't you care about your family?" Frowning, the man glared at his mother and retorted, Why should I care? We're getting divorced because I'm not good enough for her. Therefore, I deserve to be ill-treated. Besides, I can't find a job anywhere because Grant has been blacklisted. What have I done to deserve this?" After speaking, Yosef went to the kitchen to look for something to eat, leaving Winnie in the living room, still in shock. Fortunately, her daughter had married a wealthy businessman, which was why they could afford to live in this mansion. In contrast, both her son and her husband were useless. Meanwhile, at the Jarvis residence, Grant calmly analyzed the situation after the call ended. Roxanne and Lucian were waiting quietly beside him. Grant had informed them that Roxanne's mother had left an heirloom, which he suspected may have been stolen by Winnie. This was the reason for his earlier call. "Dad, maybe Winnie sold it long ago," Lucian said, thinking that was the most likely possibility. Despite being composed all this time, Roxanne's curiosity was piqued upon learning that the missing item was her mother's precious heirloom, and she couldn't help but wonder what it was. Grant shook his head, denying Lucian's speculation. Not very likely. If Winnie took it, she wouldn't have denied it just now." He replied with a frown. So, what exactly is in my mother's heirloom? Is it very valuable? Winnie is even more despicable than I thought. She even wants to take possession of the heirloom," Roxanne said agitatedly. Lucian reassured, "Don't worry, I'm sure Mom's heirloom must still be in this old house. Since Winnie didn't steal it, we just need to search for it properly, and we might just find it." Grant nodded in agreement. Roxanne, we will search thoroughly and hand the item over to you once it is found." Upon returning to the Farwell residence, Elias and Sonia asked about Grant's condition. Seeing that his wife looked exhausted, Lucian asked her to go upstairs and rest. He then informed the rest about Grant's condition.
He's fine.
Roxanne's medical skills are truly amazing. The hospital said that Grant only had half a month to live, but he can now live for 3 months after her treatment. Elias was awed by Roxanne's skills. Sonia, however, had a more indifferent reaction. People like Grant don't deserve to live that long. Fortunately, he has such a capable daughter, but he has never treated her well. Before Elias left for the school to pick up the children, Lucian instructed the couple not to mention the life and death issues in front of the children. When the children returned, they all wanted to talk to their mother. Lucian quickly persuaded them, Your mommy is a little tired today. Let her rest for a while." The 3 little ones nodded obediently and promised to behave. After sleeping for over an hour, Roxanne woke up feeling much more energetic. It was normal to feel sleepy in the early stages of pregnancy. As soon as she walked out of the room, the children rushed out, smiling. "Mommy, you're awake." The sight of their happy faces lifted Roxanne's spirits. Mommy, I have a gift for you." Estella kissed her mother and ran into her room. When she came out, she had a very exquisitely knitted scarf in her hand. When Roxanne crouched down to hug her daughter, she immediately wrapped the scarf lightly around her mother's neck. After tidying it up, she asked expectantly, Mommy, is it comfortable? Do you feel warm? Essie is really brilliant. The pattern on this scarf is really beautiful. It's no wonder she's a little genius in design. The scarf is fluffy and soft, it really suits me. Thank you so much. Roxanne never hesitated to praise her children. The little girl smiled brightly and gave her two older brothers a knowing eye gesture as if she had won something. As soon as Archie and Benny saw her reaction, they felt that their gifts to their mother might lose out. Mommy, I have something for you too. Me too, Mommy. It's going to get cold soon. Look what I prepared for you. The two boys also rushed into the room and then took out the gifts they had prepared. Their actions puzzled Roxanne a little, and she wondered if there was a special occasion. After all, her children were vying to give her gifts. And then it hit her. Today is my birthday. She had almost forgotten it. Her birthday was right after the beginning of winter. Archie gave Roxanne an emerald necklace. Mommy, this is a piece of emerald that I found in the market. It has a history of several hundred years, but unfortunately, the shopkeeper didn't know its value. I bought it at a discount and then polished it myself. With tender eyes, Roxanne received the necklace from Archie and felt its warm and cool touch. Even though the color was not as pure as that of an emerald, it was expertly polished to a smooth finish, revealing Archie's attentive nature. She immediately leaned down and kissed her son. Mommy really likes this gift. And me. Mommy, I also have a gift. Benny was very anxious and immediately opened the gift box in his hand. Roxanne continued to smile brightly. Her eyes lit up when she saw Benny's gift. It was an exquisitely crafted wooden sculpture, which was very delicate and hyper-realistic. Mommy, I bought this from the wood market. This is a kind of wood that has been submerged in water all year round. I could only make it this small because I only bought a small piece. The wooden sculpture was a goddess statue. Roxanne looked at it and praised Benny's craftsmanship. It's amazing. Mommy likes it too. I didn't expect you to be so thoughtful. After that, she praised the three little ones. Mommy likes all the birthday gifts you prepared. Thank you so much. However, she couldn't help but feel nervous. What should I prepare for my children's birthdays? Where can I find meaningful gifts? I'm under a lot of pressure being their mom. When Lucien heard the children's laughter, he shouted from the living room downstairs, It's my turn, darling. Come down quickly. Roxanne's face lit up with a smile of contentment as she descended the stairs, accompanied by the three little ones. She clearly remembered Lucien had chosen to spend time with Aubrey on her birthday many years ago. Let's see what gift he has prepared for me today. If his gift is incomparable to the children, I'll have to bring up old grievances. As they made their way downstairs, they didn't get a chance to see where Lucien was before all the lights in the hall suddenly went out. Why is he using the same trick? He did this when he proposed to me last time. Roxanne muttered to herself as she retained her calm composure. The children weren't worried either, as they had already rehearsed this with their dad. Suddenly, the sky was illuminated by a brilliant galaxy of stars, covering everything in sight. The whole was also lit up. Roxanne and the children lifted their heads, looking at the magnificent Milky Way and the sparkling stars and ever-changing nebulae. The sight was so breathtakingly beautiful. It felt incredibly realistic, as if they were floating through the galaxy, traveling through the stars. The scene changed, and suddenly they saw the blue planet receding from human civilization as they flew further and further away. They could see the gorgeous planet covered by blue seawater, and many famous landmarks in the country were still visible at first. As they flew further away, Chronicles gradually shrank into the distance. Wow! It's so realistic. It's really amazing. The galaxy is so beautiful. The feeling of traveling through the universe is really fantastic. The three little ones exclaimed in amazement, and the view of the sky changed again. They could recognize the 8 planets orbiting around Earth and pointed them out one by one.
Mercury, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn.
Estella pointed to Pluto, which unfortunately had been demoted from a planet. Although Roxanne wasn't as excited as the children, she still felt like she was in a dream. But she was still waiting. Where's Lucian's gift? As the scene changed continuously, the children exclaimed, Mommy, we are heading toward the moon. That's our moon. Hey, there's someone on the moon. Oh wow, Daddy is on the moon. How did he do that? The children's surprised voices caught Roxanne's attention. She looked over and was stunned by what she saw. Indeed, from a distance, someone was standing on the moon's surface. Upon closer look, the person seemed like Lucian. It's fake, it's all fake. This isn't real. Lucian must have used image technology to project his image into the universe. But the more Roxanne looked, the more she felt it was real. Step by step, Lucian's figure approached Roxanne and the children. They could even see the gentle smile on his face and the affectionate expression in his eyes. Roxanne was completely stunned. He held a rose in his right hand and an exquisite box in his left. Finally, Lucian's figure suddenly flew out of the moon and floated toward her. Soon, the cosmic starry sky in the hall dimmed slightly, and everything began to return to reality. Countless sparkling stars converged on Lucian, and he slowly descended from the sky to the hall.
Wow!
Daddy came back from the moon. Daddy is so cool. He picked stars from Mommy in the sky. Television dramas don't lie. Daddy can even the stars from the sky and give them to Mommy. Lucian, dressed in a special gentleman's tailcoat and holding flowers and gifts, landed in front of Roxanne like an angel. The woman sighed inwardly at this romantic gesture. Oh well. He won. It is so romantic. Happy birthday, darling. Lucian's eyes were deep with affection as he presented a rose to Roxanne. Next, he opened the gift box, revealing its contents. It was a dazzling gemstone enveloped in a gentle blue glow. It looked just like a star. Wow, what a beautiful gemstone. Daddy, this looks like the material used for the Asterian star. The Asterian star is located at Maranta. How did you manage to find something similar, Daddy? It is very hard to come by. Mommy, the gemstone is beautiful. Hearing the children's professional comments, Roxanne could somewhat guess that her husband must have put in a lot of effort to get this gemstone. Feeling a wave of sweetness in her heart, she picked up the gemstone and rewarded her husband with a kiss. Thank you, honey. As soon as she spoke, the lights in the hall came back on and the birthday song began to play. Roxanne believed a professional singer had been hired as the singer sang with such a melodious voice. But as she turned around, she was surprised to find that it was her mother-in-law, Sonia, who was singing. Roxanne was pleasantly surprised by her mother-in-law's unexpected talent. Soon, the housekeepers appeared and joined in the singing, each with a genuine smile on their face. Finally, Elias pushed a trolley with a 7-layer cake to everyone's amazement. The children jumped around, singing and drooling over the cake. Each layer of the 7-tiered cake was crafted with unique ingredients, resulting in a vibrant and visually stunning array of colors. Roxanne was getting all emotional. All these years, her birthdays were never taken seriously, and there was hardly anyone around who could remember her special day. It was only after she had children that her birthdays became somewhat decent, as she would have a cake with her children and listen to their well wishes. This year was the grandest birthday celebration she had ever experienced in her life. Her eyes suddenly became moist, but she suppressed the sentimentality and returned to a happy mood for the cake cutting. She first gave slices of the cake to the children, then to her father-in-law and mother-in-law, and proceeded to distribute it to the housekeepers one by one. Amidst the sounds of laughter and joy, Roxanne did not drink any alcohol but felt intoxicated nonetheless. She only hoped that she could continue to have days like this. Madeline had planned to take a week off, thinking it would be enough time to enjoy their journey to Horrington. However, things didn't go as planned, and after 7 days, they had only traveled half the distance. It was all because there were too many scenic spots along Zandinia. Since it was the low tourist season, there weren't many people at the scenic spots, so they had more time to travel around. Therefore, Jonathan planned several more destinations for sightseeing. On the way, Madeline saw how considerate Jonathan was toward his future mother-in-law. He was attentive to every detail and discussed every aspect of their wedding with her mother. At night, when they stayed in a hotel, she constantly urged Madeline to sleep in the same room as Jonathan. However, Madeline was reluctant to do so, even though she had already prepared herself mentally for it. Every time they slept in the same room, he was extremely gentlemanly and polite, even insisting on getting an extra bed for her. He respected her to the T. Madeline almost wanted to tell him that he didn't need to be so careful. However, he seemed to be more conservative than she was. She probably had to wait until their wedding night for things to happen. But the scent he emitted after taking a shower was too alluring for Madeline to resist. Every night, her mind was filled with wild thoughts as she watched the man bathe. It was rather challenging for her to control her desire. That night, Madeline was once again forced out of their room by her mother. She could only ring the doorbell of the room opposite with a helpless look on her face, holding a pillow in her hand. Upon opening the door, Jonathan flashed a smile. Did you get kicked out by Madame Xander again?
Yeah.
She snores too loudly anyway, and I can never get used to it. Madeline cooked up an excuse as she walked in with her pillows in her arms. She noticed that Jonathan's laptop was still switched on, indicating that he was still working. At that sight, Madeline suddenly felt sorry for him. He must be exhausted. Not only does he have to plan out our travel itinerary in the morning, taking great care in showing us where the good food was and where to have fun. On top of that, he still had to deal with tons of work affairs at night. After entering the room, she sized up her surroundings and realized that the space didn't seem like it had anybody staying in. Everything was clean and tidy. She took a glance at the refrigerator, and sure enough, her assumption was right. The drinks inside had been neatly arranged by Jonathan. Isn't this obsessive-compulsive behavior? Madeline knew that such behavior was actually a different kind of torment for oneself. Picked and rearranged the positions of all the bottles within. Then, she chose a bottle of fruit wine with an unknown brand before taking a peek at Jonathan, trying to see how he would react. Usually, individuals with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder would become agitated when others disrupt their arrangements and plans. However, Jonathan simply smiled at her as if relieved. Seeing that, Madeline said, Jonathan, I may be your girlfriend now, but I am also a doctor. As such, I can't help but advise you to stop working so hard in the future. I can help you with the travel itinerary, and I hope you can stop being so tense all the time, okay?" Although she didn't mention anything about the disorder, she reckoned she had given him enough hints. She was worried that if Jonathan returned to his work mode, he would have a relapse of the depression he had suffered due to excessive stress previously. With a serious expression, Jonathan replied, I know, Maddie. I understand your concern and intentions. Apart from that, I also know you're the only one who could heal me." His words made Madeline's face flush, her heart raced, and she felt flustered. It seemed that sometimes, a sincere comment could become the sultriest of words. All of a sudden, Madeline didn't dare to look into Jonathan's eyes for fear of getting caught in those dark pools of his and triggering her impulses. Subsequently, she opened the bottle of wine and took out some glasses. The bottle of wine was just enough to fill 2 glasses. She took the glass and walked over to Jonathan's side before handing it to him. Sometimes, a little bit of wine can help relax the mind. Don't always push yourself too hard. The reason why Madeline was drinking was so that she could sleep better. Otherwise, she thought that the sound of running water from Jonathan's shower later would make her imagination run wild.
"You're right.
Let's drink together, then." Jonathan lifted his wine glass. His smile became even more alluring in Madeline's eyes. She turned her head away as she wondered if the man was deliberately teasing her.
After clinking their glasses gently, both of them took a sip and started chatting aimlessly. They talked about the sceneries they saw, some matters related to their work, and shared some interesting anecdotes from the past. Madeline couldn't help but feel at peace being with him. Soon, they finished their wine, and Madeline turned around to fetch another bottle. This wine is sweet and the taste is really good," Madeline commented, unaware that the seemingly refreshing wine actually contained a high alcohol content. However, it appeared that the effect of alcohol hadn't hit her at that moment.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.